I think the biggest thing for investors, if we want to call them that, will be hopefully increased transparency and hopefully less volatility in Bitcoin going forward.
Okay, so you think the introduction of futures is actually going to reduce volatility long-term in Bitcoin?
One would hope so. You know, the exchange requirements between the three of them, so between the CBOE, the CME, the Merc is also going to list, and the NASDAQ early next year, they're requiring substantial cash deposits in order to support Bitcoin here. So I think by default, we're going to see more transparency. I think the biggest thing for you and I to watch, hedge funds want to sell Bitcoin. And there's been a big short getting ready to come into this market, and that's going to be the thing everyone's going to be watching for. Okay,
so the futures give more sophisticated investors the opportunity to short, right? But what does this mean for the overall legitimization of Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency? Because I know we've spoken in the past about this. You're not really a believer in the story, right?
No, not at all. And I think calling it a currency is a misnomer. I mean, right now it's trading like a highly volatile asset or a commodity. It's not really used in any form of exchange with anyone. And look at the fundamentals. I mean, tomorrow if we come in and if Bitcoin's up 40%, why? You know, in the old days, you and I would say, well, Warren Buffett was a buyer of the stock and it's up 10%. Here, there's hardly any transparency or any visibility into this as an investment. And that's what investors really need.
So price discovery is particularly hard, but what do you think's next for Bitcoin? I mean, if it's not going to be a viable means of exchange or a store of value, do you think this is just going to be a speculative instrument in the future?
That's to be determined. I think right now the biggest conversation among regulators is whether or not Bitcoin is a systemic risk to the system. So if we see Bitcoin go down 20, 30, 40%, what will that do to retail investors? And let's be clear, institutional investors are really not playing in this at all. They see this as one of the most significant and prolific bubbles in a generation. Here, though, for retail investors, the real question will be if it truly wipes out, what would that do to them? And I think that's the biggest concern.
So Deutsche Bank says this is going to be one of the biggest risks for 2018, what you've just highlighted. You agree with that view?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the concern will be whether or not it's a systemic risk. So if the exchange puts us in a position where we see a down 20, down 40, conversely, at the same time, we might have to put requirements on how much people can buy in this relative to what it actually is.